Okay, this is an interesting episode. We'll always have Paris. Has absolutely nothing to do with the majority of the episode's plot. It's very tangentially related to something in the episode. And that's actually something related to Captain Picard, because this is one of those episodes that doesn't really use everyone. And that's actually part of where this episode gets a bit odd. At any rate, though, for purposes of writing this as a TTRPG module, the core aspect of this is Federation scientists are trying to figure out a way to meddle with temporal mechanics in a way that is practical and productive, and things get weird. Weird in a way that doesn't technically count as time travel, but it's distortions of the timeline that are much smaller scale than actual proper time travel. And that would make for some storytelling that is interesting because of the fact that you can surprise people with things that they weren't expecting because they don't make sense from the perspective of linear time. Having weird temporal vibrations in shutters that displace things in time briefly. It makes for an interesting surprise gimmick because, like this thing here. This is a temporal paradox event where there are three versions of Data because of the fact that Data is seeing his past and present selves at the same time as his present self, which, you know, it's an amusing visual effect. How would you actually do something with that in a story, though? And because this scene ultimately has Data go and be like, wait a second, only one of us is able to actually make this work properly. Which of us is the right one to do this? I'm not entirely sure why he actually bothered thinking about that, but whatever. I mean, a player in a TTRPG trying to deduce which is the right person to do it, I mean, yeah. I don't know about that one. You would have to come up with something that would be a proper um logical deduction thing in order to give the player a reason to actually make a decision. In the episode as aired, Data's solution is to basically assume that the um, most that the other two are actually echoes of his past and not his present. Thus, the one that's in the front, closest to a glowing energy beam, is actually the real one, or something like that, if I remember correctly. Yeah, this is one of those things where the fun of the episode is the whole non-linear time thing and seeing things that under normal circumstances would be flatly impossible, and yet they exist. Like getting out of the turbo lift only to see yourself getting in, or vice versa. Here. Only one of us is in the correct time continuum. They figure out which one it is, and he releases the antimatter and seals the hole. Oh, it doesn't even bother saying in the wiki article which of the three was the right one. Why? Honestly, they only did that as to throw in a last minute a teaser. It's like, oh wait, there's one final obstacle to solving the problem and saving everyone. You need to figure out which of you is real. Have fun with it. Yeah, that lasted all of like 3 seconds. Uh, which honestly is what I would really expect something like that to be in the game. But here's the thing with stuff like that. When you're throwing in weird, goofy temporal shenanigans, you don't need them to be a serious hindrance. Sight gags make for fun of adventures, or can anyways, depending on how you work them. And throwing in weird sight gags as a way of abusing the players, hey, go for it. It's fun. At least some of the time, anyways. Depends on, again, everything is conditional on whether you do it right. And there's definitely the potential here for having players do all sorts of weird nonsense. Like playing chess against yourself. Just like one of those things is like, yes, but if it's my future self, then uh he goes like the future self thing in the chess thing. Your future self might remember what your past self did, but your future self has to follow the memory of what your past self saw and reacted to in order to get things to go the right direction. And yeah, that could be fun. Anyway, this is the location where it happened. Why did they have a pulsar as the specific location they chose for this? That is actually something you rarely see in Star Trek, even. A habitable, sort of, solar system where one of the primaries is a pulsar and not a proper star. Oh, right. Well, Vandor 4 isn't exactly a Class M world, shall we say. They did build a research outpost here. So I guess, that would be one of the reasons. Anyway, though, it is an interesting idea, pondering what it would be like having a pulsar as a solar primary. But for this episode, everything takes place inside a outpost built on the surface with fully contained atmosphere and life support systems. And basically on the inside, it might as well be a space station, except it's stuck to this planetoid. Anyway, though, the Mannheim effect, like I said earlier, it's like temporal vibrations. It's like people getting shifted a little bit forward and a little bit back in time. And not in a meaningful way, only a few seconds often. And of course, the whole Mannheim dying thing. This sort of temporal distortion can, in fact, be highly destructive and potentially deadly. Like if part of your body was to get shifted slightly in time to be slightly out of phase with the rest of your body, that's kind of sort of the same effect as getting cut in half. Seriously. And yeah, I don't actually remember what the issue with Mannheim was. So Gymnast Mannheim, this person here, why exactly she likes Picard, I don't remember. But she's one of those like interesting story important NPCs who we never see again because that story is over and we're doing a different story now. Da, 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 da. Anyway. Oh yeah, that's right. The time when Picard looks at Paris is actually a holodeck simulation of Paris. However, this is a holodeck simulation of Paris as it exists in the Star Trek universe, which is why you have the utter incoherent landscape you see here, where you have the Eiffel Tower like right next to the edge of some sort of a canal. This really, really futuristic looking retaining wall on the edge of the canal. And this bridge going over the canal that looks as though it's made out of antique stonework, but has a high-tech rail going through it. Oh, and the tube rail is routed through the lower part of the Eiffel Tower, which hasn't fallen down yet, despite the fact that it, is made out of iron and is probably going to rust into oblivion in a few decades real world. Seriously. They had World War III in the Star Trek universe, and they didn't accidentally destroy the Eiffel Tower. Didn't fall down due to lack of maintenance or something like that. Whatever. Anyway, though, this skyline of Paris is actually something where I'm genuinely curious if this matches up to any real-world skyline. Because the only point of reference I can think of is that bridge, the canal, and the Eiffel Tower, because none of this other stuff looks like anything from the real world. And I'm not even sure those particular points of reference are actually something that would even work as a valid point of reference. I don't know that much about the Paris skyline. Anyway, though, this episode is something that has a bunch of interesting ideas. But the whole thing is figuring out how to stop the temporal vibration effect because of the fact that the Mannheim effect, as it's called, isn't controlled. If it was controlled, it might be useful, but it's not. And that is the core issue here and why they have a problem with it. Why exactly it's referred to as time gravity, I'm not entirely sure. But it's possible that's just one of those things where the script writers were trying to make something sound cool. Anyway, let's see. Farming colony on Koltar 4. Oh, it's just something that's mentioned. We don't really see it, I guess. So he doesn't actually die. Do. Yeah, Mannheim's tinkering did result in him figuring out how to distort time. It's just, like I said before, not in a useful way, in a random chaos sort of way. Now, this is something that's an interesting thing, though, is that his experiments opened what he referred to as a window into a different dimension. And that is something that you could ponder, though, because like one of the things that I've mentioned in some of these other episode things is that Star Trek does have the idea of layers of reality. We live in normal three-dimensional space. The Selene live in a different layer that is, I guess you could say, below subspace, which Federation science doesn't actually know how to enter. The Selene can create portals from where they are to normal space if they have the ability to detect something that is a point of reference for them to target with the portal. But no one really knows anything about the realm that the Selene live in. Is it simply a pocket of subspace, or is it actually like an entire, like, proper dimensional layer? Then there's fluidic space. Some versions of this have it that the whole multiple timelines thing, all of those timelines interact with the same fluidic space? Or is there a different fluidic space for each alternate timeline? Interesting question. And of course, there's the fact that we don't actually know what alternate realm or level of reality Mannheim actually went to. And that's the other thing about this that's interesting is that the actual cause of the Mannheim effect was opening a window into a different dimension. But the episode, as aired, did not ever show us what that dimension was like. And we don't actually know what the nature of the other dimension was. Although, this does make it seem like it was something extremely different. And the Mannheim effect, as it was called, those temporal distortions were, I guess, like I said earlier, I like to refer to them as temporal vibrations because of just how small of a ripple in time it is. It's like the timeline is vibrating, and the area affected by these temporal vibrations was getting larger and larger and larger. And if the window was left open, maybe possibly it would, expand to the entire galaxy and maybe possibly start destroying a lot of stuff. Because that was the thing I was mentioning earlier is that, if part of an object gets displaced in time by a few seconds, that might break the object. Might not, but it might. And that's the sort of problem that this temporal vibration was causing. And I mean, one possibility is he may have actually opened a window into that place that the traveler took the Enterprise to, which was this weird blue void of like um, a version of energy slash space that reacted to thought and became what you wanted it to be. Well, I mean, who knows? But if you were to play with this in a TTRPG, you could have fun with examining the reality of what the other dimension was. But as a game master, you would have to think out through how you want the actual physical laws of it to work and how it is that it's dangerous. Because one possible logic for having the temporal vibration effect is that maybe possibly the temporal vibrations are caused by the other dimension simply having time that moves faster. Um, yeah, I don't know. Oh, right. They went to Vandor 4 because they were using the pulsar as part of their research. Okay, sure. Um, Again, though, the exact nature of what Mannheim did to create the Mannheim effect wasn't actually explained in the TV show. It was kind of sort of hand waved. And attempting to explain it, that's some interesting food for thought. Especially if what you have for your story is someone attempting to recreate Mannheim's effect by a different person who has somehow acquired a copy of his research and is trying a different approach towards doing the same thing. And again, though, it's that Mannheim was dying because of his exposure to the other dimension. Not because he's an old man, but because of the nature of the exposure to the other dimension. That is something else that's interesting to ponder here. How dangerous is the other dimension in and of itself? But as the game master, you get to be the person who decides that. Because as the original episode didn't actually go into any real detail there. It's just a tiny few hints. And you, as a game master, don't need to actually stick to that because you're going to do something that suits your personal story, and you don't need to directly copy what the TV show did. And, having fun with it and tweaking it a bit makes things very, very interesting. And I'll leave it there. Fun episode. Very interesting ideas for the plot. Very science fiction concept heavy episode. In one of those where the bizarre temporal mechanics are absolutely the forefront of the story and need to be thought through very carefully in order to make it work properly. And with that, I will bid you see you next time.